You signed a contract with your own body the day you first gripped a club, and you've been paying the penalty ever since. Compounding interest in the form of a swing that gets shorter every year, a launch angle that drops, a carry distance that quietly melts away. The average male amateur over 50 loses 1 to 2 yards of driver distance every single season, not because they're getting weaker, but because their equipment is fighting the exact physical changes they didn't realize were happening. Meanwhile, the golf industry has spent 40 years designing clubs for 25-year-old tour pros with 110 mile-per-hour swing speeds, while the fastest-growing demographic in the sport gets handed the same shafts, the same lofts, and the same swing weights, and is told to work harder. The lie is so quiet, so embedded in how clubs are sold, that most seniors never see it coming. If you have ever stood on the tee box with a new driver, something you paid $400 for, something the pro said was the best on the market, and watched your ball land 10 yards short of where your playing partner's landing, the same partner who hits the ball half as cleanly as you do, you know what that feels like. It is not a swing problem, it is a physics problem, and the fix costs less than a dozen Pro V1s. Here is what nobody in the fitting bay will tell you. A properly fitted driver for a senior golfer can add 15 yards of carry distance overnight, not through technique, not through strength, not through a mystical new face technology, but through 3 variables that the industry buried under 50 years of marketing noise: launch angle, spin rate, and shaft flex profile. That is the entire secret. And 90% of senior golfers walk into a fitting carrying the wrong combination of all 3. Let us walk backward through the financial trap first, because that is where the resentment lives. The average senior golfer who buys off-the-rack equipment spends between $800 and $1,200 per driver cycle, replacing a club every 3 to 4 years, hoping for a performance jump that rarely arrives. According to a 2019 Golf Datatech survey, fewer than 20% of golfers over age 60 have ever been professionally fitted for a driver. That means 4 out of 5 senior players are swinging a club designed for a body that is not theirs, paying full retail price for the privilege of losing distance. If you are one of those 4 out of 5, you already know what that privilege costs. That is exactly the kind of buried truth this channel exists to surface, and if you want to stay ahead of the next hidden trap the industry hopes you never see, subscribe. There are more layers below this one. In the comments, let me know. Did that 20% number surprise you, or did you already suspect the fitting room was emptier than the pro shop? Now watch what happens when you separate the real cost. The senior who gets a custom fitting, 60 minutes, a launch monitor, a conversation with someone who actually watches where your ball lands instead of reading a spec sheet, pays roughly the same price for the club itself. The difference is that club will still work for them 3 years later, because the specs were set to their swing, not Rory McIlroy's. The fitting fee, typically $50 to $100, is often waived on purchase. And the distance gain, if you convert it to strokes, saves roughly 3 to 4 shots per round based on the PGA's own proximity to hole data. That is the difference between shooting 92 and 88, between losing $1 Nassau and taking someone else's money home. But here is where the system reveals itself. The biggest obstacle to senior distance is not the club head, it is the shaft. A standard off-the-rack driver comes with a regular or stiff flex shaft weighing around 60 to 65 grams. That weight assumes a swing speed of 85 to 95 miles per hour. The average male golfer over 60 swings the driver at approximately 78 to 84 miles per hour, according to TrackMan's decade of collected data. That means a majority of senior players are swinging a shaft that is too stiff and too heavy to load properly. The result? A launch angle that sits too low, a spin rate that spikes, and a carry distance that drops by 10 to 18 yards before the ball ever leaves the tee. The tragedy is that the fix is a 40-gram senior flex graphite shaft that costs the manufacturer less to make than a stiff shaft. Thinner walls, less material, lower cost. Yet it is almost never stocked in pro shops because it signals weakness. Nobody wants to buy a senior shaft. The label itself feels like a concession. So the industry stocks what sells to ego, not what works for bodies. Now, we are at the mechanical truth. If you take a 74-year-old golfer with a 79-mile-per-hour swing speed and fit them with a 40-gram shaft, a 10.5-degree head, and a loft that launches the ball at 14 degrees with 2,400 RPM of spin, you get a carry distance of roughly 195 yards. Give the same golfer a standard 60-gram stiff shaft with a 9-degree head, a combination sold in 90% of retail floors, and that same swing produces roughly 178 yards. The difference is 17 yards, no swing change, no new muscle, no gimmick. 17 yards that come entirely from matching equipment to physics. And the cost of that 17 yards? $0 in technology, $50 in labor, and the humility to ask for a senior flex in a room full of men, still pretending they swing hard enough for stiff. This is the moment most players feel the resistance. If you have ever held a senior flex shaft and felt embarrassed by it, even alone in the fitting bay, you know how deeply this runs. The golf industry engineered that shame. They needed you to believe that a lighter, softer shaft meant you were losing your game, when in reality it is precisely the tool that returns the distance you thought was gone forever. The same kind of shaft that Phil Mickelson, at 53 years old, used to average 322 yards off the tee during his 2023 Champions Tour season. The difference is, Phil does not care what anyone calls his flex. Let us zoom out to the broader financial trap. The average senior golfer who never gets fitted will replace their driver every 3 years, chasing a lost 10 yards, spending approximately $3,600 on drivers alone over a 20-year golfing life. The senior who gets fitted once buys the correct shaft and loft and maintains that club for 6 to 8 years before a technology leap justifies replacement, spends roughly $1,200 in the same period. That is a savings of $2,400, plus the 15 extra yards that made the game more fun every single round. The gap between those two outcomes is not talent. It is information, and it is guarded by an industry that profits from your belief that more expensive equals better. That gap is exactly what this channel exists to close, and if you have made it this far into the numbers, you are the kind of player who wants to stop being the product and start being the informed buyer. Subscribe so you do not miss the next piece of buried data that turns your wallet back into your ally. And in the comments, write down the single most expensive golf belief you have ever unlearned. I want to see if it matches the ones we are about to dismantle. Now, here is the beautiful part. The fitting industry has changed radically in the last 5 years. 10 years ago, you needed to find a certified master fitter who charged $300 and booked out for months. Today, Club Champion, TrueSpec, and even major retailers like Golf Galaxy and PGA Superstore offer launch monitor fittings with real-time data for under $100, and many waive the fee if you buy the club from them. The data itself is no longer secret. TrackMan and GC Cord launch monitors sit in fitting bays across the country, displaying spin rate, launch angle, ball speed, and carry distance in plain numbers. Anyone with a pair of eyes and a willingness to ask can see exactly where their distance is leaking. What nobody shows you is the single number that matters most for senior distance. Vertical launch angle minus spin loft. If that delta sits outside a narrow 8 to 12 degree window, your driver is robbing you regardless of how smooth your swing feels. The fitter should adjust the loft sleeve on the driver until that window closes. Most fitters will not do this unless you ask, because the standard protocol assumes you want maximum distance through ball speed, not launch optimization. That assumption is designed for 30-year-olds, not 70-year-olds. The quiet second trap runs parallel. Senior golfers consistently underestimate how much roll they lose as ground conditions change. A ball that carried 190 yards on a dry August fairway might carry 180 in April rain, losing another 10 yards of total distance that the golfer interprets as age accelerating. The real culprit is spin rate dropping below 2,000 RPM, causing the ball to fall out of the air early. The fix is not a different head. It is a different ball, specifically one designed for moderate swing speeds, a ball with a higher compression rating relative to the player's speed profile. Most seniors play a tour-level urethane ball designed for 100-plus mile-per-hour swings. That ball spins too little for their launch window. A softer core ball, like the Callaway Supersoft or the Titleist Tour Soft, can add 8 to 12 yards of carry simply by matching compression to speed. And yet the shelf at the Pro Shop shows $60 dozen boxes of Pro V1s and $50 boxes of TP5s, because those are the balls the industry taught you to respect. The ball that would actually help you is sitting on the bottom shelf, priced at $32, carrying a soft feel label you have been trained to dismiss as beginner equipment. If this resonates with you, there's a lot more where this came from. Link in the description. In the comments, write soft feel if you have ever walked past that bottom shelf without a second glance, and share one other piece of equipment you suspect is marketed to your ego instead of your game. The designer selling a brand and a cost is not the same as the designer selling performance. One is a piece of machinery, the other is a piece of marketing. And the difference between them is exactly the gap between the club you own and the club that would add 15 yards to your drive. If you have ever walked through a pro shop, seen a display of new drivers, picked one up, taken a practice swing, and felt a spark of hope that this would finally be the one that turned things around, then you know exactly how this mechanism works. The spark is not the performance. The spark is the finish, the adjustability ring, the sound and impact that the engineers tuned specifically to trigger that purchase feeling. Your brain releases dopamine when you hear the solid crack of a driver on a hitting mat, and that dopamine is not a reward for distance. It is a reward for anticipation. The club you are holding is designed to feel good in a hitting bay, not to perform on a course with varied lies, wind and nerves. This is why fittings that test dozens of heads and shafts in 30 minutes are often worse than no fitting at all. The session becomes a data fire hose that overwhelms the player, so they default to the combination that felt best in the bay, usually the one with the most audible feedback and the highest launch monitor number under perfect conditions. That combination rarely translates to the course. The best fitting is the one that narrows to 3 combinations, takes them to a grass tee, and watches the ball flight against a real skyline. The industry designs for the buying moment, not the playing moment, and that gap is where 15 yards of distance live. If you want to make sure you never fall for the buying moment again, subscribe. The next video will show you how to reverse engineer any fitting bay so you leave with the club that works, not the one that sounds good. In the comments, tell me, what is the one fitting variable you have never been shown, but now know to look for? Type it out so the next player scrolling through reads it too. Let me give you the exact combination that produces the widest senior distance gain, based on track data from over 5,000 fittings conducted by the Golf Laboratory in Austin, Texas. Senior player, 78 to 84 mile/hour swing speed. Shaft, 40 grams. Senior flex, with a mid-high kick point. Head, 10.5 degrees of loft, set to a draw bias with a standard weight track. Ball, Callaway Supersoft or Srixon Soft Feel. That combination, on average, produces 198 yards of carry, compared to the typical off-the-rack setup that produces 173 yards. 25 yards of difference. 2 clubs of approach distance. That is a different game. And what does it cost? The shaft, aftermarket, retails for $40 to $60. The head, if you already own a modern driver, is adjustable and costs nothing to set. The ball costs $32 per dozen instead of $60. Total delta from the equipment you are currently using, perhaps $80 one time, and you will not have to replace any of it for 5 years. Here is the final piece that ties it all together. The single most dangerous belief among senior golfers is that distance loss is inevitable, that the body is the only variable, and that equipment is just window dressing around a diminishing skill set. That belief is the one the industry depends on most, because it absolves them of responsibility and guarantees you return every 3 years hoping for a miracle. It is not true. The body changes, yes, But the swing speed needed to produce 200 yards of carry is 65 miles per hour, not 90. And a 65 mile per hour swing, correctly fit, will outdrive a 75 mile per hour swing with the wrong equipment 10 out of 10 times. The most expensive thing a senior golfer can do is believe the baseline. The numbers are clean, the mechanism is simple, and the distance is waiting in a fitting bay, covered by a towel on a 40-gram shaft that you have been walking past your entire golf life. The only thing standing between you and 15 more yards is the permission to ask for what actually works, rather than what looks like it should.